Greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast. I'm your resident has been host because I am a has been, and I'm very proud to be a has been, a semi-retired has been. But we just use this platform to spew business about sports and Purdue and everything else. But anyway, it is Thursday, December 4th. This is being recorded before a live studio audience of one, which is our cat, but I don't know where the cat's at. But the cat will pick up and watch this at another time. But anyway, lots lots to discuss, lots going on, lots coming up. Start with men's basketball. They have not been good in December road games in the Big Ten over since the league went to this format where they play, teams play one at home, one on the road. um, of their 20 game schedule. And then after Christmas, the full schedule picks up again. But Purdue's not been good uh, on the road in these games. And the schedule, it should be in their favor when in the past when they've done this, because the Big Ten doesn't want to waste marquee matchups in December with its better teams. Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois. Those type of teams don't play each other in in December. They play each other in January, February, the way TV wants it. But anyway, Purdue went to Rutgers the other night and won convincingly. So they kind of got you know got that off their back a little bit. Um, on the flip side, during this last 6, 7, 8 years, um, Purdue's been really good at home in December Big Ten games, but not so good on the road. I think they're now 3-6 in those games. Beat Rutgers convincingly, 81-65. It was a 15, 20, 25 point game. Purdue, the formula for Purdue this year is pretty simple. Rebound, which they've done very well this year, especially when they uh, got Trey Kaufman-Renn back after the first couple games. And then take care of the ball. They had 9 turnovers. This team is so good offensively that if you do those two things, because less turnovers means more opportunities to shoot, more opportunities to run your offense, and they have too good of shooters and too good of offensive players to be kept down. Um, as long as they take care of the ball, they're going to have opportunities to score, and there's enough weapons on this team that should be able to overcome a bad night by somebody. But when they are clicking and doing everything that they're capable of doing, they're going to be a hard team to beat. And then rebounding, they're limiting teams to second chance opportunities, and they're getting second chance opportunities. And Trey Kaufman-Renn has been a monster on the boards. He 19 and 13 against Rutgers. Um, and Oscar Clough has been brought in to do what he's doing, rebound and be active around the basket and be a defensive presence around the rim. Daniel Jacobson the same way. He's been solid. He's as of going into this Saturday's game against Iowa State, he's made 20 straight field goals. Now he's a big guy. Some of those are dunks. Some of those are just right around the basket. I think a couple of those are threes. But he's hit 20 in a row over what, a 4.5 game stretch. He was 1 for 1 the other night. He was 8 for 8 against Eastern Illinois back after Thanksgiving. So, he's a weapon. He's a force around the rim on defense too. He's 7'4", but he's giving him an offensive punch. And him and Braden Smith play the lob game, and Purdue's able to get some easy baskets that way. But they have a deep team. Um, Not everybody's going to hit on the same night. Jakari Harris the other night, 11 points off the bench. He's kind of been struggling or not getting enough opportunities early, and took advantage of his minutes on on Tuesday. And Jack Benner didn't play, So that opened the door for Liam Murphy to, get more minutes. So they're in good position. I think Saturday's game against Iowa State will be a fun game. The way Iowa State plays and the way Purdue plays. This is a really good series to be played. I mean, both schools academically are similar. Both schools athletically, I think, are similar. Both great basketball programs. Both great home court environments. Um, Next year Purdue will go to Iowa State and experience that venue and how loud it is, and it is loud. But Mackey Arena is loud too. So this is this is a natural fit to me that these two teams should play each other, and the coaches know each other well. And I think the Iowa State coach helped with getting Lance Jones to Purdue because he had coached him at some point. So they have a good relationship, and these games come together sometimes quickly, sometimes they don't. But I do think this is a great series for Purdue, and I think more if football could do it, I think it'd be great. But the limited opportunities in football with the number of conference games and non-conference games that you need to play at home, and Iowa State already has Iowa on a yearly basis, and they're not interested in adding another Big Ten team. But I think the Purdue Iowa State football series would be a good one as well. Maybe one day down the line they'll hook up in a bowl game, um, because I just the schools are alike. You know, agricultural is big at both places, and they seem to share a lot of the same values of each other. So Saturday should be one of the better non-conference games, not only in the Big Ten but in the country. And it'll be at noon. CBS is broadcasting it. Big day in Indianapolis, by the way. I know Purdue's not in Indianapolis, but I think Louisville plays Indiana at 2 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and then you got the Big Ten football championship game later on that night at Lucas Oil. So kind of a big day in the state of Indiana on Saturday. But the men are in good shape. I've raised this question before. I do think they'll get through the end of the calendar year unbeaten. I think they should be able to beat Iowa State at home, and then you got Minnesota at home. Now, Minnesota knocked off Indiana last night in their Big Ten opener. They got a new coach, new system, new everything. But I think Purdue can take care of business at home. They got Marquette coming up at home. This is not the Marquette teams that Purdue has played in the past. Then they're playing Auburn uh, down in Indianapolis. Again, they had coaching change. Bruce Pearl's son took over, but they lost a lot from last year. Still probably a top 25, top 30 team in the country, but that's a game that I think Purdue would win. And then they finish out the non-conference after Christmas with a game against Kent State at Mackey Arena. And then you get into 2026 where you're all Big Ten at that point. And but I do think Purdue can get through the rest of the calendar year undefeated. And not that that matters, um, but that's kind of the way that I see it right now. Now they're gonna have some setbacks in the Big Ten just because that's what happens. It's just you can't. That's a force of nature that's going to happen, and other teams are going to suffer the same fate. I mean, every time you turn around, though, the Big Ten is being hailed as a conference that's going to produce a national champion this year, whether it's Purdue, whether it's Michigan, Michigan State. Um, those are the three that really come to mind. Michigan State's off to a good start. Michigan's been really impressive. Um, so it will be a fantastic Big Ten season, and I think Purdue has a majority of those games, of the bigger games, or what you would term the bigger games at home. I know Michigan's at home, Michigan State's at home. They play Indiana home and away. Um, I think Illinois is at home. Maybe maybe wrong on that, but that's I think Purdue gets most of the marquee games at home, which should benefit them in putting together the regular season. So the men are in good shape. Really, no concerns as of right now. As long as they rebound, and take care of the ball, I think they're going to be in really good shape. Can't say the same thing about the women. They've they blew a 16-point lead at Central Michigan. Um, that's one that just can't happen at any point in a season or any point in a coach's career. It just you can't do that. And then Central Michigan went out and lost to Michigan um, Wednesday night by 40 some points, and Purdue plays Michigan coming up on Sunday. Um, it's not trending good for the women's team going to Michigan to open the Big Ten season. Michigan's number 6 in the country. They have one loss to UConn, a game where they were down 17 early and came back and made it a game, and um, they were within striking distance late, but just couldn't get over the hump. But it was a bad loss at Central Michigan. It just completely threw them off track as far as what they needed to do in the non-conference. I mean, they have such a small margin of error. In reality, and I think I've talked about this before. The goal this year is make the Big Ten tournament, which the top 15 teams make. Purdue did not make it last year. That's the number one goal, is to make the Big Ten tournament. Number two, take care of business in the non-conference schedule, games that you handpicked in an effort to get wins, and you've already lost two games that were winnable. They tried to get out of the Kentucky series. That didn't work. They got beat by 41, which, they needed to be 10-1 in the non-conference season. The best they can do right now is be 8-3. They won Wednesday night against Evansville, and they should have won by the margin that they won. It was 91-49. And they've got the rest of their non-conference games are at home, and they have played much better at home than they have on the road. In those games, they should be able to take care of uh, and probably get to 8-3 in the non-conference. But they're still going to be behind what they should have been. They needed to be 10-1. Um, you lose on a last second shot at Purdue Fort Wayne, and then you lose at Central Michigan. Um, if you can't beat those two teams, how are you supposed to match up in the Big Ten? Um, and that's a real concern for this club. And found out last night that Taylor Feldman, the point guard that they had recruited from Northern Arizona to be their point guard, she's a natural point guard. She did not play last night. She's day to day, um, but I wouldn't expect her to play in the near future here. She's dealing with a back injury that she suffered in the off season in the summer. She had been playing minutes. In back-to-back games recently, she played 27 minutes, looked good. Um, she's a one that can push the ball in transition, kind of get them into their offense a little bit quicker. Um, can shoot the three pretty well. She is undersized, in my opinion. And I worried about her going into the Big Ten season, dealing with bigger guards and athletic guards that you see on a nightly basis. And then you compound that with her back issues. Um, the Big Ten was going to be really physical for her. But I don't anticipate seeing her here in the near term, or maybe the long term. Um, I don't think that based on some conversations, um, she's not. I don't think she's seeing the best version of herself. And those people out there that have had back issues, or know people that have had back issues, there's really only two ways. I mean, there's one way to try to fix it, and that's surgery. And I don't know the extent of her injury, whether surgery is even an option. But that's one area. But to me, that's a drastic move. But back injuries don't heal themselves. It usually takes rest and rehab and recovery. And just taking it easy. And she's young. There's enough. They have enough recovery stuff, whether it's the massage guns or put you in a chamber or whatever they do to help with that recovery. But every time you practice, every time you go out on the floor to play, you run the risk of aggravating a back injury, which can set you back even farther. And I think, again, just talking to a couple people, I think that's the kind of concern there is that she's not going to see the best version of herself. Purdue won't see the best version of herself. She won't be the best version of herself. And, maybe later in the year, when if she feels better, she could play. But, the other option that I would think that they would consider would be, can she potentially still redshirt? This is her last year of eligibility, but could she still redshirt and come back and play next year for Purdue? Now, that doesn't help you now, and it leaves a void from a point guard perspective. And they have players that can play the point, but they don't have, she was recruited here for one reason, to be the point guard, and because she had the intangibles to be the point guard. One of her strengths at Northern Arizona was getting to the free throw line, and she's not done that a whole lot, in part because she's dealing with this back injury. So that's gonna hurt them. But I will say, and I think she's, again, in the minutes that she's played, she has provided some production. She's you know shown some ability that they noticed on film that they felt like could help them. But I don't. This season doesn't come down to whether she plays or not. You know how much not having her will prevent Purdue from, even if they had her, Purdue's not beating UCLA, they're not beating USC, they're not beating Maryland. I can go down the list. But if you do have her, maybe you win that game against Wisconsin and Penn State, Rutgers, and Northwestern that puts you in position to make the Big Ten tournament. So if you follow along what I'm saying here, I don't, what would Purdue's record be with her and what would Purdue's record be without her? I'm not sure there's going to be a big difference. They can beat the teams on the non-conference schedule without her. Um, even if she plays against Michigan, Purdue's probably not going to win that game. Um, but you'd like to have all hands on deck. This would be, if she doesn't get back, to be the second player that they brought in that had suffered kind of a season-ending injury, and we don't know for sure if that's going to be the case with her. But Taylor Henderson, suffered an injury on the first day of official practice in September, and she's done for the year. If they don't have Feldman, again, we've seen glimpses of it, how much she potentially could help, but again, there's certain teams in the Big Ten, even if she was 100%, that you're probably not going to beat with her. So it's just something you have to weigh a little bit. But it's not a good situation because this is a year where you needed to A, get in the Big Ten tournament, B, get enough wins in the non-conference to absorb the losses that you're going to suffer in the Big Ten, and just maybe, you put yourself in a position at the end of the year, if you get in the Big Ten tournament and you have enough wins to potentially make a non-NCAA postseason tournament, WBIT, WNIT. To me, that was really the goals for this team this year. Making the NCAA tournament is not, um, I don't believe, a viable option for this team at this point. They'd have to get on a big run. They'd have to upset some teams in the Big Ten, and basically play their ass off for 18 games to try to get themselves in position. I mean, they're not moving up to the top of the league. They're not moving up. It'd be hard for them to even move in the middle of the league. Um, Again, I think getting them out of the bottom three into the 15 14, 13 spot is was always the goal. Now, I think it makes it a little bit tougher to do it without her. But they've got some players. Tara Day will probably be the main point guard now, and she's really never played the position until now. She's very athletic, very long. Um, she's a menace on the defensive end, but she's kind of embraced the point guard position and does a good job of distributing. She's their leading scorer. She's their leading rebounder. She going into Wednesday night, she tied for the lead in steals. She's the player that gets to the free throw line the most. Um, and then you're going to need some help from Madison Layden Zay, Kiki Smith, Ela Karsh. They're going to have to run the point in some fashion. But the bottom line is Purdue will not have a true point guard for extended period here. Um, and that's something that they're going to have to deal with. In it coming up, looking ahead, not to look too far ahead, but um, I the season's starting to come down to me 2 games after Christmas in the Big Ten. They host Illinois and they host Ohio State. Now, assuming that they lose at Michigan on Sunday, but then they beat the rest of the non-conference teams on their schedule. They have Lipscomb, Dayton, and Jackson State coming up. And if they can get to 8-3 in the non-conference, um, but then you have Illinois and Ohio State coming up after Christmas, both home games, and this team has proven it plays better at home than on the road. Now, the competition has been different, but they seem more comfortable at home. They seem just in a better frame of mind at home. That if you can steal one of those 2 home games, ideally you win them both, but that may be too much to ask. But if you steal one of those home games, that kind of puts you in a better situation as you go through the Big Ten season, where, right now you need to beat Wisconsin, Northwestern, Penn State, and Rutgers. You need to beat those teams to get out of the basement. Um, but if you somehow beat Illinois and or Ohio State, that kind of takes a little bit of pressure off there because I think, if you get to 4 or 5 wins in the Big Ten, you're going to get out of the basement because those teams I mentioned are not going to beat UCLA, USC, Maryland, Michigan, so on and so forth. They're just not going to do it. Purdue's in that same boat. So, but they can't go on the road and lose at Central Michigan. You can't blow a 16-point lead. And you just can't have players standing around not doing anything. Um, I don't think there's strong leadership on this team, especially in late game situations. So, they've got to, but some of the players that they have, you know who they are. So, and you've got to, that's something you knew before the season. You know who some of these players are, and in trying to change them at this point doesn't work. But you just can't have your main players kind of disappear at crunch time when you need a basket. You're trying to ward off a comeback by Central Michigan. So um, it's not all lost right now. I mean, there's still some goals ahead of them, and but it's getting to the point where they had a small margin of error before the year, and it's even smaller as we get into it now. So, but those are 2 games that I would really look at to kind of gauge what might happen the final 2 months of the season. I mean, Illinois and Ohio State comes in here and beats Purdue convincingly, um, which I would be surprised if that happened right now. Then it's probably going to be a long Big Ten season anyway. But if you can get one of those games, it softens the blow a little bit, gives you some confidence that maybe, then you go to a Wisconsin, you go to a Northwestern, and you get Rutgers and Penn State at home. Maybe you can um, take care of business there. You go to Minnesota, which, Minnesota's not, you know, elite, but it's a team Purdue should play with. But maybe you can steal one of those. So I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, a lot of things um, that have yet to play out. But um, yeah, we'll see how this all goes. Volleyball will be playing in the NCAA tournament coming up this weekend. Well, Thursday and Friday. Um, they play Wright State on Thursday, and then uh, if they win, they'd be in the second round against Baylor or Arkansas State. And then if they get through the first and second rounds at Purdue, then they would go to Pittsburgh, probably play SMU, which is a team they beat uh, in the in the non-conference. And volleyball's had a really good year. When you look back at what they lost with the All-Americans that they lost in the transfer portal, another player they lost to Minnesota. Um, they finished tied for third. Um, they had a bunch of all Big Ten honorees. I mean, they had a good year. I think this is a team that plays well together. Um, you know, Willard is kind of their superstar, but not not one of these household name superstars. And I think players have kind of fit their role, played their role, and again, they play well together. Um, I expect them to get out of the first and second rounds, and then when you get to Sweet 16 or regional semifinals, then you kind of take your chances there. But they've had a good year. Not a lot was expected from them after they lost their All-Americans in the transfer portal. Um, but it's a credit to Dave Shondell and program he's built and how they've um, developed their players to have this kind of year. So be curious, really interested to see how they fare in the NCAA tournament. They lost some matches here lately, at Wisconsin, at Minnesota, which is, you know, those are two really good programs and really good teams. Um, but I do think this team has shown enough during the year that they can take care of business in the first and second round. Won't be easy. They play a lot of five-set matches this year. Probably get at least one of those, at least get one five-set match in the NCAA tournament that they're going to have to deal with. They've also done some reverse sweeps, and that's uh, that's quite a chore to do, um, especially in the NCAA tournament. Um, so yeah, Holloway Gym will be full on Thursday and Friday night, and interested to see how that plays out. Football had its signing day, which is earlier now, and 21 players signed. 17 are coming in second semester, which is really good news. They were able to get a legacy. Jet Goldsberry, his dad played at Purdue. He goes to Heritage Hills down in southern Indiana, kind of a safety. He's a guy that will probably get an opportunity early to play. Um, so, they signed those guys. How many of them are going to get to play? I mean, the fact that 17 are coming for second semester classes in spring ball, it's a positive sign. But to me, the thing to watch is what they do in the portal. Barry Odom brought in 54 newcomers last year, a lot of transfers. And I don't think the number will be that high, but it's based on who you can retain. And they've always had some guys jump in the portal. They're going to have more guys and some names that are going to jump in the portal, recognizable names that will move into the portal over the next few weeks. The portal officially doesn't open until January, but you can declare if you want that you're going to be in the portal. You can announce to the world that you're going to be in the portal. That way, you open yourself up for business. Um, And then, schools can talk to your agent and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of gray area here of what's going on. So, um, but yeah, I think the sooner players get their names out there, the better. And it works both ways. I mean, Purdue knows who's going to be in the portal, and there's a lot of back channeling that goes on here with players that they know that are going to be in the portal either through just connections in the college football world or through agents or whatever. They have an idea, and then you can start putting together a plan to potentially nab some of these guys uh, when they first get in. What I've learned in this portal thing, and I'm not as knee deep into it as I used to be, but one thing I've learned is that once once you get in the portal, usually your decision has been made as far as where you're going, because those things usually get ironed out before you officially announce you're going into the portal. Um, and that's just the way that it kind of works, like free agency in pro sports. They have the free agency period where um, you're eligible to sign players, but most of the players already know where they're going by the time that date comes because the agents and the teams have already talked and discussed everything and agreed to terms on a deal and all that kind of stuff. So while it may be a surprise to the public who who's in the portal, I think a lot of these things are going to be set and predetermined by the time it happens. But Purdue needs upgrades. They need upgrades at receiver. They need upgrades in the secondary. I still think they need to um, try to get an elite quarterback. Um, if you're going to move the needle on this program, I firmly believe you need to really um, find a quarterback that can make everybody around them better. And Ryan Brown does a good job. He's okay, um, but I just don't think he's at the level that you kind of need to compete in the Big Ten. And he's still young. He's kind of inexperienced, but um, Purdue should be able to be in the conversation with elite level quarterbacks. A lot of it based on their history, but just in general. Now, you need guys that can catch the ball. That was a problem last year. Um, and they've got to replace some running backs. They've got to shore up their offensive line. And nowadays, it's about where you allocate your money and what's the priority. Quarterbacks are going to demand more, but you have to shore up the offensive line um, to be able to do the things you want to do offensively, and then on defense, I'm a firm believer that you put together football teams from the inside out. You start at the center position and you work your way out. Defensively, you start defensive tackle, work your way out. Maybe not as much as you do on offense, but if you protect the quarterback, if you get after the quarterback, your chances of winning increase a lot, in my opinion. I don't have all the data to back that up, but if you watch enough football over time, that's kind of what happens. You have to protect your quarterback and you have to disrupt the other team's quarterback. If you do those two things, I think you put yourself in a better position to win more games than you lose. So where does Purdue invest its money in revenue share? You know, we'll never know the exact figures because they won't release them. Um, but Purdue needs to, got through year one with Barry Odom. Um, they've got some losing streaks they need to snap. The schedule's not really in their favor other than Indiana State in the first game. You got Wake Forest at home, Notre Dame at home. Wake Forest is not a pushover. We know about Notre Dame, and then we just don't know the sequence of Big Ten games yet. We know who they're playing, and as of right now, uh, they'll have opportunities in the Big Ten because I think they got Wisconsin, they got UCLA, I think they get Minnesota at home. So I mean, they'll have opportunities, I think, but a lot of it depends on the sequence of games, as we saw this past season. You know, they had their opportunity in October to get a couple wins, and they were on the verge of getting a couple wins, and it didn't happen. And then once they got to November, where you're playing Michigan, you're playing Ohio State, Washington, and Indiana, I mean, Purdue had no chance in reality. I know the Michigan game was close, but those other games were not. But if Indiana's always going to be the last game of the year as of right now. But if you shift the Ohio State game and you trade it with Minnesota, or the Washington game and you trade it with Rutgers, um, it's not as daunting. Now you still got to play those teams. I get it, but just back to back to back to back just gave you no hope. So let's see what the sequence of games is like in the Big Ten. Um, and every team's going to have a rough stretch, and um, but Purdue, Odom needs to push this thing forward, um, from a win standpoint, but also from a talent standpoint, and that's part of the portal, part of the signing day, um, of what they did the other day. So, um, this is something to monitor. Now that's over, but you know, obviously a big Big Ten championship game on Saturday. I don't think either one of those teams gets impacted. Um, gets knocked out of a bye in the college football playoff. They shouldn't. Yeah, I guess if one team blew out the other, it might impact them a little bit, but obviously the winner is going to be the number one team, and that's where Ohio State is right now. I mean, if Indiana wins, they would move up to the number one team, and Ohio State would not drop very far. Uh, they'd probably drop to two, and if it's a close game, Indiana's going to stay where it's at. So I think those two teams are pretty well locked in to their positioning, and should be a great environment down there on Saturday night. Indiana's never been there. Um, Purdue was there a few years ago against Michigan. So it's we'll see what happens with that. College football is always changing, always evolving, and you wonder how long we're going to have championship games. Um, they don't seem to um, they don't have the value anymore that they used to, uh, because Ohio State and Indiana are pretty well set for the college football playoff. Okay, in the SEC, you got Georgia, Alabama, maybe a little bit of bubble territory, but not much. And then uh, BYU and Texas Tech, I think in the Big 12. Um, I'm not exactly sure their status, their bubble status. I watched the show the other night, but can't really remember where they were in the rankings. And the ACC kind of messed up, based on results, and you have the debate over Miami and Notre Dame, um, and the question has been this week is, when does head-to-head matter? Because Miami beat Notre Dame earlier in the year. Now, Miami suffered some other losses since then. Um, the whole body of work thing. But I think if one of those teams gets in and the other one doesn't, I think, there'll be a lot of screaming going on. And maybe the best thing is not to put either in. Um, and I don't know how many, I don't know how much, how many more data points the committee needs, to be honest, to make their determination. Um, but anyway, it'll be fascinating, and bowl season and all that kind of stuff. Um, and before you know it, um, we'll have the Big Ten basketball tournament upon us. Things move quickly when you get old, and they're moving really quickly now. But anyway, that'll wrap it up for today. Appreciate you taking time to absorb, soak up the podcast as I just ramble along as I normally do. But anyway, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and we'll do this again. As I said, we'll have several things to discuss next week uh, across the board uh, with a lot of things going on uh, in the sports world. But anyway, have a good day. Again, appreciate it, and we'll do this again next week. Thank you.